How involved was Donald Trump in his own defense?
I mean, what do you think? I mean, very involved. And he's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. He jokingly said to us a lot, sometimes he wanted to be the litigator. You know, he wanted to be the one that was actually arguing because he's a smart guy and he knows what he's doing. We made every decision together. We did. And there were things that he was frustrated with.
Were you satisfied with jury selection? And was the former president involved in that in any way?
I mean, very much involved. He was right there with the whole team talking about the potential jurors. Look, was I satisfied? We put a motion in because we said we could not get a fair jury in Manhattan. And that's not I'm not being disparaging to the jurors, man. They were great. They showed up on time every day. They were committed. They paid attention. But we're in a situation where we had a very limited number of people we could strike. And most of the folks, overwhelming number of folks, had a very strong opinion of President Trump. And it wasn't positive.
They paid attention.
You know, he talked about, Willie, how Donald Trump was so involved and so engaged in everything, and he wishes he could have been the litigator, and yet he was afraid to take the stand. He wouldn't even get up and talk in his own defense. So I don't know how much he really wanted to talk in there after all.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we'll talk to our legal experts, but there was nothing particularly unusual about jury selection here. They had their chance to strike jurors just like we do all the time. But yeah, Donald Trump didn't want to take the stand. And you do get the sense that Donald Trump, and he had all those Republicans who showed up at court for him, including the Speaker of the House of Representatives, to tear down the process in preparation for what happened yesterday, which is to say they knew the evidence was strong, it was overwhelming, perhaps didn't expect to go 34 for 34 on these counts, but they knew there was a likelihood that he would be convicted of something here. Therefore, they had to attack the judge, they had to attack the witnesses, they had to attack the jury in some cases, and attack the process to say that it was rotten and therefore he couldn't get a fair trial. We've outlined all the reasons that's not true. And Joe, we've talked about this, whether or not you believe this should have been brought. This case should have been brought at all. It was. Evidence was produced, was given to the jury. The witnesses came and gave their testimony, and a jury of Donald Trump's peers in New York City, 12 of them from across the spectrum with different views of the world and views of Donald Trump, agreed unanimously, and by the way, relatively quickly, if you look at how long this trial was, that he was guilty on all 34 counts.
Yeah, and you know, Willie, that's the thing. It's such an important point that you just brought up. You could make arguments that this case should not have been brought. The Wall Street Journal editorial page, whoever came up with this line in the editorial this morning should get a bonus. They talked about it, the Turducken legal theory, like, you know, everything like shoved inside and fried. It was, again, and I've said it here time and again, I'm not so sure that any conviction, given the legal theory underlying the case, is going to hold up on appeal. Maybe it will, maybe it won't.
It's going to be a long time of court stuff.
Right, but that's something if Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz or anybody else wanted to go after the DA bringing the case and say, you know, talk about how they disagree, that the legal theory didn't make any sense. That's one thing. But to attack the jurors, to savage the judge, that's just, you know, I think most people would consider that to be un-American. And you saw, and I'm so glad that President Trump's attorney showed respect to the jurors and said they did a great job. They did everything that was asked of them. They showed up early. You know, they were always there on time. They listened. They paid attention. You know, that costs him, that would have cost any Republican senator nothing, and actually would have maybe won a little bit of respect from people that were listening to the message. But instead, they go straight to, we're communist Cuba. And it's a joke.
That was Senator Rubio actually said that yesterday. And one of Donald Trump's adult children said, this verdict officially makes us a third world country. He used another descriptive term. So when the legal system works against you, when a jury of your peers convicts you after hearing the evidence, suddenly we're a third world country. But Donald Trump, either way, now is the first former U.S. president in American history to be convicted of a crime. Late yesterday afternoon, a jury of 12 New Yorkers found Trump guilty on all 34 felony counts against him in the hush money criminal trial. That came after the jury deliberated for roughly 9.5 hours over a couple of days. Sentencing is now set for July 11th, just 4 days before the Republican National Convention begins in Milwaukee. The maximum sentence for falsification of business records is 4 years in prison. But incarceration is not a mandatory sentence. It will be Judge Juan Merchan who ultimately decides the punishment. Jonathan Lemire, Eugene Robinson are still with us for this hour. And let's add to the panel former U.S. Attorney and MSNBC legal analyst Joyce Vance, former acting U.S. Solicitor General and MSNBC legal analyst Neil Katyal, and President and CEO of the National Constitution Center, Jeffrey Rosen. Good morning to you all. Joyce, let me begin with you and your reaction to a verdict of 34 for 34 on these felony counts against the former president.
Yeah, I mean, it's something, Willie. You know, I've talked to a lot of juries after they've reached a verdict. I live in one of those jurisdictions where the judges give you permission to do that several days after a verdict is returned. And what I heard over 25 years was jurors who wanted to express to us how much they honored their oath, that they had tried so hard to set aside any bias or preconception, that they deliberated based only on the evidence and reached their verdict based on the evidence, whatever that verdict was. And that's what this jury did here. They listened to the evidence. They reached a verdict based on the evidence. We saw signs of them working through it. So look, Donald Trump is in the process of trying to spin this verdict now. And Americans need to reject that spin. They need to ignore that. They need to use the same common sense that the jury used here. The jurors are the ones who listened to every bit of the evidence. That's something that we didn't have the opportunity to do. Most of us had to read about it on the cold record or hear reports on the news. The jurors heard every piece of the evidence, and they made a decision here for all of us. I think it's important that we not let Donald Trump, who has done so much damage to our institutions, shake our faith in the jury system, because the jury system did its job here. It listened to the evidence. It returned a verdict. We should accept that verdict.
Neil, I'm curious, sentencing is set for July 11th, and Chuck was talking last hour about the allocution part of that, and that is where the defendant has a chance to express remorse, say something. If a defendant expresses remorse, could that impact the sentence that the judge decides?
I mean, that is the most counterfactual hypothetical I think I've ever gotten. There's no chance that he's going to express remorse. He himself has just been going out and attacking the judge, attacking the jury, all of that. But yes, if he expressed remorse, that would be relevant along with his conduct during the trial. But here, do remember, the prosecutor, Steinglass, said here, this is a really serious offense. This is something that may have put Donald Trump directly in the Oval Office. So it's going to be very hard, I think, to get away without jail time. Now, I want to pick up on something you asked Joyce about the jury verdict here, because I think Joyce is absolutely right. But the jury verdict here tells us a lot. I just add to it two things. One is that it's not just a jury verdict in terms of a majority vote or something. In our country, it's got to be a unanimous verdict. All 12 jurors had to agree. And they had to agree under the most difficult standard in the law, the highest burden of proof for the prosecutors, called beyond a reasonable doubt. And the jury did all of that, listened to the evidence, and so concluded. And now you've got all of Trump's allies, including Trump's own lawyer in the clip you played, say, oh, this jury was unfair to Donald Trump. They didn't like him and the like. I mean, there's two problems with that. One is, like, it's just wrong. Like, there was juror number 2, who literally the only media that juror 2 consumes is Truth Social. But that juror was one of 12 jurors who voted to convict Donald Trump. The other is that they're trying to set up an argument about a challenge to venue on appeal, that this was an unfair jurisdiction to try Donald Trump. Every high-profile defendant tries this tack, and it fails. I dealt with it myself when I was special prosecutor in the George Floyd murder. Derek Chauvin made exactly the same argument Trump did, Look at Minneapolis. I can't get a fair trial. I'm demonized and the like. The judge rejected it and the Court of Appeals rejected it because everywhere in the country there is pretrial publicity. And that's true for Trump just as much, and so the standard for a change of venue won't be met. I think he's got no decent appeal on these grounds.
So, Jeffrey Rosen, let's get your reaction yesterday to what is simply a significant moment in American history. We don't know yet what impact, if any, it will have on this year's election, but this was a day that we will always read about in the history books. Get your sense of the system working, and also beyond that, what you feel the appropriate sentence would be.
The most remarkable aspect of President Trump's reaction to the verdict is that he attacked the entire system as rigged. He attacked the judge as crooked, he attacked the jury, and he attacked the prosecution. And this represents a historic change in American constitutional law. The founders thought that only virtuous leaders would save the republic, and that we'd also needed the auxiliary protections of allegiance to the rule of law when you lost. And Lincoln, right before the Civil War, says that once we abandon our attachment to the rule of law, we're going to succumb to the mob. And it is a sign of third world countries. It's a sign of communist dictatorships that you attack the rule of law as rigged when you lose. That's what happened in Brazil. When the president loses office, he goes to jail, he's pardoned, he runs again. His successor says the system was rigged, and then people storm the Capitol because they won't accept the election. The urgently important thing at this crucial moment in American history, even if you think the prosecution was unfair, even if you think the verdict should be overturned on appeal, is to accept the result of the rule of law. Because in this polarized time, once citizens abandon a commitment to accepting verdicts that they disagree with, then we really will lose the foundations of the constitutional republic. As for the appropriate sentence, that's really a question for New York state law. It is true that if President Trump were to be reelected, then he's unlikely to serve jail time. Even the Supreme Court might say that he has to be able to have his responsibilities and do his duties, and therefore jail time isn't appropriate. But the judge should apply whatever sentence New York law plausibly requires, not treating President Trump differently than any other defendant, in order to reaffirm this really important point. And it's very important that Republicans also accept this and not go the way of attacking the system as rigged, because once we do that, we really have the founders' nightmare.